Hello and welcome to Thrive in 5. This week's Torah portion, Parshas Shlach Lecha, contains a commandment for us to put fringes on our garments called tzitzit. And if you've been in shul before, you've noticed men wearing prayer shawls, probably with these fringes hanging off them. But actually, we're commanded to wear them all the time. Some of us wear them inside of our clothing. The reason for the commandment is ostensibly because we live in a very physical world, and they're to remind us that God runs the world. He's commanded us 613 commandments, and we shouldn't be lured after our, senses. But what's fascinating about the commandment is the way it's phrased, that we shouldn't follow after our heart and after our eyes. I would expect it to be the opposite. After all, first you see that piece of chocolate cake, and then you want to eat it. So why is the commandment phrased the way it is? When I was a younger man, I was pretty shy for the most part, but always open to pushing myself. So when my mother's door-to-door vacuum cleaner salesman offered me a job selling Electrolux vacuum cleaners for the summer, I took him up on it, and I surprisingly ended up doing pretty well because I was a young, kind of clean-cut college boy. People would let me in the door. But sometimes I would choose to go out with some of the more seasoned professionals. There were actually people who sold vacuum cleaners door to door, believe it or not. I don't think they exist today. And one of them was this guy named Newton. And one day Newton and I went to an apartment building to go sell vacuums. And sure enough, I got in first. He went off to find his own opportunities. And I found myself in the living room of an elderly widow. And I whipped out my vacuum cleaner and started to do my thing. And I had been trained how to sell, how to open and build value, overcome objections and close. And I was doing great. There was just one problem. I was getting nowhere. She was having none of it. There was a knock on the door at some point, and lo and behold, there was Newton. And he had failed to gain entry into any of the apartments. And he asked if he could sit in and watch. And I said fine, and I went back to basically beating my head against the wall. And at some point, he interjected. He says, do you mind? And I said, okay. And he turns to the woman. He says, Mrs. So-and-so, buy the vacuum cleaner. Your housekeeper will love it. And she buys it right there on the spot. I was thrilled to have the commission, but I was also baffled. Like, what did he do? And on the way out, I asked him, and he turned to me and he said, can't you see? She's a lonely old woman. All she wants to do is make somebody happy. Here I was thinking I was going to show her a wonderful machine and that was going to make her want to buy it, but in truth he understood. He had to first tune into what she wanted and show her how that vacuum could fulfill it. And that vacuum would actually go from looking like something that wasn't worth the time of day to her to something that was worth the $400 or $500 that she plunked down to buy it. We oftentimes think that our heart is the servant of our eyes and all of our other senses, that we see the world as it truly is and we make decisions and want things based upon that. But in truth, our senses are servants of our heart. Depending upon how we see things and how we feel about things and think about things, things can actually look entirely different to us. And this is very powerful information, not only for the sellers of the world. Certainly, if you want to get somebody to do something or buy something, you need to understand what they want, and if you can tap it, you got something powerful. But it's also valuable information on the buying side for the consumers of the world, because it's so easy for us to forget just how biased we truly are. Recently, I went online on Amazon.com to read the reader reviews for a book that I had read called Darwin's Black Box. And it's a book about creationism, intelligent design versus evolution. And I knew it was an emotional topic, and that's why I went on, and I wasn't disappointed. The gamut of opinion was staggering. Anything from people who thought he was a genius to people who thought that he was a complete imbecile. And I'd be willing to wager that if we were to tap any of those people on the shoulder and ask them where their opinion came from, they would insist it was based on a cold, objective, rational review of the book itself. But something inside of me, I don't know about you, tends to be a little skeptical. It's so easy for us to forget just how influenced we are by what we want and how that can actually make the world look entirely different. But it's important for us to keep this in mind, and I think that's what our commandment is reminding us, not because we're going to be able to change our fundamental nature. We can't help but be subjective in this way. But at the very least, being aware of that can, I think, make us a little more humble about our opinions and the choices that we make, and perhaps encourage us to take a look inside, discover some of the things that we want, some of our biases, so that we can, at the very least, factor them in to the decisions that we make. Thanks so much. Have a wonderful day, and hopefully we'll see you next week.